But I think the thing that sort of ties all this stuff together is like YouTube has monetization built around sharing revenue on a percentage basis with its creators. And TikTok, in its attempt on its way up to stealing tons of market share from YouTube, but wanting to keep creators on TikTok, has decided they want to also give revenue to their creators, but they've done it with a different mechanic. They've built a singular creator fund. And your video has done a better job of explaining it than I ever could, so it's going to be linked in the show notes. Everyone should watch that at least before getting to this part. But the worst part about this creator fund is that fundamentally, the better TikTok does, the less successful individual creators using that fund actually do. Is this a mistake by TikTok? Is this a greedy thing by TikTok? It's a weird, obvious thing that they should have all thought of by now. So I'm curious why you think they decided to go with a creator fund rather than revenue sharing.
It's super smart. Like if they never experienced any pushback about it, it would just be smart. So basically the situation is there's a static pool of money. And so if currently there's let's say 10 billion views a day on TikTok, and they're distributing that fund among those people who earned those 10 billion views. Then if 6 months from now there's 20 billion views on TikTok a day because the platform grew, you get half as much money per view because there's more views in the same pot of money. Yeah. So that's the problem. It's amazing, and that is clearly the limitation of the static pool of money. But the creator fund idea itself, I think, is quite smart, actually. We all together experienced that it kind of was maybe bad for YouTube to be tying revenue, people's revenue directly to the advertisements running on their channel. And also advertisements running on a video was a bit of a problem, because then it meant that how does YouTube police where Coca-Cola's advertisements show up? And they have this preferred program where we promise that the content is not terrible, but sometimes even the people in the preferred content might make stuff that's a little edgy.
Yeah.
And so we ended up in the situation where they have to have this tremendously complicated moderation system to decide whether or not something is worthy of certain kinds of advertisements. It's a mess. YouTube and TikTok doesn't have to worry about that. The other thing that is great about a creator fund is that you can divide it up based on what you want to encourage. So so I get higher CPMs than average because my audience is older and I make educational content and it's really brand safe. But on TikTok, everybody basically makes the same CPM. But you could make it so that a creator gets more money for their first million views than for their second million views, so that you're encouraging people to, because it's easier to get your second million views than your first million views. Mm-hmm. It's just how it is. And you could make it so that you reward people for creating content that has more engagement, or is less controversial. You can measure controversiality scores based on how disliked something is, or how much sort of yelling there is and negative sentiment there is in the comments. Yeah. So you can do that. You could just sort of, as a platform, decide what kind of content you want to be encouraging with dollars. And you can't really do that the way that on YouTube, that's just decided by advertisers and where they want to advertise. Yep. So a example of a huge problem of this is if you tend to make content for a Black audience in America, advertisers are less interested in buying that content, because the average Black person in America has far less money than the average white person in America. So so you literally, just because you make content for Black people, make less money. Yeah. Which is wild.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the weirdest questions that I've had, literally about the adpocalypse that happened back in, I guess we've had more than one of them on YouTube, but about the association directly between the advertiser and the content that they appear in front of. I always thought it was pretty clear that a Coca-Cola ad appearing on a YouTube video didn't actually associate Coca-Cola with whatever's in that YouTube video. At least I personally always felt that way.
Yeah, for sure.
But it somehow became this really strong like reaction from all of these brands to pull out because they didn't want their brand associated. And I'm like, I've seen a lot of ads before, a lot of like when I see an ad on TV, for example, on in between like quarters in an NBA game, a lot of times it's a product that's related to sports because that makes sense and that's where the audience is. I don't remember the last ad I saw on YouTube and what video it was in front of. I don't even know. It's usually some reasonable product. I don't remember.
Do you not have YouTube Premium?
I do, but when I'm signed into it, like the Shorts account, which doesn't have Premium, then I see a bunch of ads and I forget to switch back. Yeah. So I'm like, I can't believe that was such a massive driver of the Adpocalypse, but it really was like the direct tie between
do you
brands.
Want do you want me to bore you with the deep reality of why that happened?
I would love you to.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's two components of it. The first is that the last like 80 years of television ads have been sold that way. They say you can reach this many people, but really what you're doing is you're aligning yourself with content. And in this case, the content is some stuff that people feel really passionately about or that makes them feel good. And so it was easier to monetize like sports, for example, because people have a lot of passion around sports content. So it's much easier to monetize, to sell ads around the Super Bowl than it is to sell ads around like CNN, where you don't really know whether like what the vibe of that day is going to be. And so that is how ad agencies have been selling brands on content on TV for decades. And so that is how brands think about it, because that's how brand advertising agencies have talked about it to them. And it's also how the content providers have talked about it to them, how the television stations talk about it to them. So like that's been how you sort of like beyond just the demographics and beyond just the number of people you're going to reach, that's how you try to like add the extra icing on the cake. So they talk about this a ton and how important it is. And then finally, and you switch over to YouTube and it's like, it's not important anymore at all. Don't think about that. We're not advertising on the content. We're advertising to the person. It's just an algorithm. You are choosing the person to advertise to, not the content you're advertising on.
Right.
And which is more or less how it works, though the content still matters. And then the other important piece of that pie is that during the Adpocalypse and before and also since, though it is getting a little less this way now, advertising agencies really hated Google. They hate them so much because Google is putting them out of business, because Google does their job. Google says you don't have to work with an advertising agency. It's 4 clicks to figure out how to reach your audience. You can reach your audience better than you ever could with an ad agency. And ad agencies were like, that's wrong. We're in New York. We make $400,000 a year and we need to continue making $400,000 a year because I have a mortgage. So ad agencies were able to say to brands, look, I told you YouTube sucked. I told you Google sucked. They're putting your logo next to terrorist recruitment videos, next to people teaching other people how to stab each other. And now look what you've done. You've ruined your brand reputation. And also the third piece is brands wanted leverage against YouTube, and like this was an opportunity to exert leverage against them. And it worked, and it kept CPMs low for years after that.
Yeah, this was one of the things.
It was a very successful thing. It was very bad for YouTube.
It was like a chapter in internet history. I do remember going to one of the creator summits, which by the way is another thing YouTube does that I don't know that any other platform does, but it's sort of a gathering where YouTubers are talking directly to YouTube. And something that kept coming up was like, well, don't the advertisers need YouTube more than YouTube needs those advertisers that dropped out? That's always
been the case I make.
Yeah, they always need each other, but it's like, if you pull all of your advertising off of YouTube for whatever this reason you really believe in is, eventually you're going to realize you got to get back to that audience somehow, and those people are borderline unreachable any other way. So come back.
Well, that seemed to be what changed this year, where YouTube's revenue went from $20 billion to $30 billion in 1 year. And that's a wild number. That is, it's bigger than Netflix.
It's crazy.
And Netflix has like hundreds of millions of people who just give them $10 a month.
Yeah.
And YouTube's just doing it through almost all through advertising. Though, please sign up for YouTube Premium. It's so much better.
I second that.
Listening out there.
I highly recommend it. the ad-free experience is great.
It is, yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Of course, you want to make sure you subscribe to the Clips channel so you never miss these, but also subscribe to the main Waveform podcast channel because there's more of you here than there are watching the full episodes, which I get it, but like the full episodes are pretty good too. Also, we've got some really good episodes coming up, some good guests, some really good fun. You're going to want to be here. Trust me, hit the red button. It's a good time.
Don't want anyone to see, maybe.
Yeah. No spoilers.
If you click subscribe, you might see it. I don't know what that sound was. What was that? Oh, it was the sound of you clicking the subscribe button. Nice. I see you. All right.